Hey, this is Mohal Joshi from Los Angeles, California. I follow Indian foreign policy and defense with a special focus on Asia. You can follow me on Twitter at Mohal Joshi.
Hey, this is Kishore Narayan from Bengaluru in India. I am an international relations expert specializing in global security, conflict resolution, and international negotiation. My focus areas include peace building and digital diplomacy. You can find me on Twitter at Veggie Diplomat. Hello and welcome to episode 17 of India Rising, Strategic Affairs Conversations with Mohal and Kishore, a show in which we analyze the happenings from around the world and their impact on India. In today's episode, we have a distinguished guest, Ramaharitha Pusarla, join us back again. Remember, she had joined us in the year-ending special episodes that we had carried out. Welcome back, Harita. Harita is a columnist and a writer. She can be found on Twitter at Harita Pusarla. She writes on strategic affairs, foreign affairs, and also domestic politics and social issues. So welcome back, Harita.
Thank you, Kishore, for your nice introduction, and it's like pleasure being on the India Rising show again. Thank you both.
The pleasure is ours. Yeah, the pleasure is ours. So today, what we will be doing is now that the term of the current Lok Sabha is coming to an end, and Prime Minister Modi's term is coming to an end, we will kind of look back at how India's foreign policy has been in the past 5 years, and try to analyze what happened during these 5 years, and also try to analyze, was it good for the country? Were there any weaknesses, or were there any lacuna that could have been addressed better? So it would be a nice roundup of both the positives and the negatives. So without further ado, Harita, the stage is yours. You can start off.
Okay. Let me begin by saying that Modi stumped his critics right even before taking his swearing-in ceremony by calling the SAARC leaders for his swearing-in ceremony. It was like even the strategic affair analysts and the close India observers found that this is an out-of-box initiative. Though they had apprehensions about Pakistan being a participant, Nawaz Sharif, despite having domestic at home, made it to the event. So the event turned out to be a grand success, and then that marked the beginning of NDA-2's foreign policy. So from then onwards, it was kind of rolling on, continuing with India's tradition of first going to Bhutan. Modi has embarked on his first foreign visit to Bhutan, and then rejuvenated the ties. And he spoke at the joint parliament. He addressed the joint parliament of Bhutan. And even before that, like to give a massive fillip to India-Pakistan relationships, Modi and Sharif had like bilateral talks just on the day after the swearing-in ceremony, and then they decided that foreign secretary level talks should begin, and even the cross-border trade across the Atari border has started. So after giving this like a huge kickstart to this kind of relationships, it was like Modi has taken these strategies by surprise, like by visiting Nepal, the first PM to visit Nepal in 17 years, though Nepal is just our next door neighbor. Indian leadership, for numerous reasons, hasn't cared enough to revitalize ties with Nepal. Same is case with Sri Lanka. In March 2015, Modi embarked on a 3-nation tour, which was supposed to include Maldives. But then at the 11th hour, they have cancelled the Maldives trip because of domestic unrest. But then, like again, on his first visit to Sri Lanka, which comes after a gap of 28 years, Modi took every care to nurture the relationships very carefully. And then coming back to Bangladesh, he gave he ratified the long pending 4 decade long 4 decade long pending land boundary agreement. And then from there itself it was the ball kept rolling, and then it was a smooth he initiated friendly talks with Sheikh Hasina, who was also favorably poised towards India, and she took some initiatives handing over the wanted terrorists to India, and then thus the confident building measures they have cemented the Indo-Bangladesh relationship. So, and
Okay.
then coming to Afghanistan, India has focused on its development and restoration of a peace as it's going to be its priority aspect. And then with the inauguration of Salma Dam and other things, it has become loud and clear that India is going to be a robust developmental partner of Afghanistan. So with this foundation, basic foundation, he has created a tremendous impact in the South Asia. And then
So,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead, Harita.
Same is the case with the Indo-China affairs. On his first trip to Japan, while he lashed out at China for his imperialistic attitudes, which no other prime minister on his first visit could haven't ever thought of doing it. But then he issued a bold statement, but then hasn't gone back on that, in the sense he hasn't yielded to President Xi Jinping when he has come to India. Though there were incursions across the border, he has conveyed message to the president that India is not happy with this kind of developments. And soon, within 3 days, all those incursions, everything we have were settled very smoothly. And then they have initiated taken up this issue of allowing Indian pilgrimage a safe passage to Kailash Manas Sarovar. So these were the kind of steps which Modi has taken, or the Modi government had put in a lot of efforts to just nurture the relationships and cultivate good ties with the nearest neighbors or the immediate neighbors. And thus he has unveiled so to speak, in 2014, he has successfully unveiled the neighborhood first policy.
So when I listen to you bringing out all these points, I kind of get a feel that Modi's foreign policy was not designed to have a 5 year window, but rather to have a larger 5+ year window, probably a 10 year window, to have a robust foundation. So whatever you say makes me think that this is just the beginning in terms of strengthening the ties between India, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, even India, Sri Lanka, for that matter. So that's the kind of sense I get. Would you agree to that, Harita?
Yeah, exactly. It is he has laid a foundation. So he hasn't anticipated the hiccups which are going to come, but then
Right.
he had a pragmatic vision that India's relationship with the immediate neighbors are the key if it has to really establish itself as a responsible power in the
Yeah.
South Asia.
In a way, that was obvious, right? When you have China lurking in the background, you would know that you would always have a complex equation rather than a simple equation, even in case of bilateral relations. However, I think what was pertinent at that point in time was to have a strengthening of the relations, ensure that there is no trust deficit between the two countries, and hope that China would go away, uh, either forcefully or
Yeah.
otherwise.
More than
Um,
all, like I just want to emphasize one thing. It's like India has come out of that shell of strategic inertia. So
mhm, mhm.
that was the
Mm-hmm.
thing. That was the, like what should I say, like the greatest thing which Modi has done, like overcoming that strategic inertia, timidity, and diffidence. So
So,
that marked the beginning.
okay.
So Harita, like you very well put out all the positives of the neighborhood first and the increased engagement with other countries, including those in the Middle East and elsewhere. So, what do you think were the things which could have been the negatives during the last 5 years and the failures during the last 5 years in context with the neighborhood and Middle East?
Yeah. What I can say is like India, to begin with, it has started off on a positive note, but then it couldn't foresee the kind of reaction which the countries could have had, like coming to like India Nepal downturn in events, like while India Nepal relations touched a new high after Prime Minister Modi has rushed all the security apparatus or rescue and relief apparatus just 3 hours after Nepal was hit with an earthquake. But then that kind of a momentum India has failed to sustain. Okay.
Mhm.
That was a huge, like kind of a great, what do you say, great goodwill gesture, which as a bigger neighbor should have done to a
Right.
smaller neighbor. But then what happened is like maybe like people cite that Indian media had a role in like irking the Nepalese domestic sentiments through like through their broadcast and all that. That was one aspect of it, shortcoming of rushing our rescue forces and all that, even timely intervention. But then that couldn't like really build up that goodwill gesture. And then just months after that, when Nepal wanted to promulgate its constitution, the skirmishes between the Nepalese people, like people living in plains and then Madeshis, has added up to this kind of a negative sentiment which was just blossoming. What I mean to say, that the Indo-Nepal blockade, and then which led to like uh, preventing like which left Nepal high and dry, because like they were grappling for fuel and essential food
Mhm.
supplies and all those things.
I think the
So
statement coming out from MEA during that time also did not help matters.
yeah, exactly. So these were all the kind of things which they haven't like even thought of. Like
Mhm.
they were doing just what they wanted to do. They haven't anticipated this kind of a thing. And also like it's also partly to do with the kind of irritants which were playing between India and Nepal for quite, those political irritants. They have received some kind of a fillip or massive shot in arm because of this Indo-Nepalese blockade. So that
Mhm.
was one aspect, like presented a biggest hiccup to this bilateral ties. But after a certain time, like India realized like it must make the first step, and then it has sent Sushma Swaraj to Nepal to like talk to the leaders there, and then after that it was followed by a Nepalese prime minister's visit to India, which has kind of like stabilized the Indo-Nepalese relationships to an extent. So that was one phase of it, one hiccup which I can like really say that India should have done really better. And
Mhm.
barring that, like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, India was like kind of having a good relationship. But in between Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, I must say that in Indo-Bangladesh relations were having a smooth sail, and both
Agreed.
leaders were
Yeah.
having a kind of an mutual understanding about how they have to go ahead and take the relationship forward.
Yeah,
So,
I
but
think
when
Bangladesh has been a real high point for Modi's foreign policy.
Mhm. So,
exactly,
so,
exactly.
so Kishore, coming to you, I mean, there was a
Hmm.
good summary of the neighborhood. Let's look at the big powers or the great powers, as they are said, like US and Russia. So, how have
Hmm.
we fared on relations with US and Russia? Can you go through them one by one?
I think, yeah, I think I'll start off with Russia and then talk about the US.
Mm-hmm.
Russia, I think India had nothing much to lose. India was continuing its strong bilateral relationship that it had with Russia. However, due to geopolitical changes that were happening around the world, India was seen to be slowly drifting into the US bloc, although not officially. And that kind of had started creating a vacuum and a trust deficit. And this helped Pakistan, which also started having trust deficit issues with the US, for Pakistan to cozy up with Russia. So you now saw Russia playing a balancing game between
Mm-hmm.
India and
Yeah.
Pakistan. In fact, there was a minor controversy when Pakistan had invited Russia to take part in some military exercises in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and
Mm-hmm.
India had to stamp its foot hard, asking Russia to back off. And within 1 or 2 days, clarification came out that Russia was practicing in Pakistan proper and not in POK. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the kind of irritants that were there in Indo-Russian relationship. But that apart, the positives had to be the continuation of the defense ties that we
Mm-hmm.
have with them. The purchase of the S-400 missile shield
Mm-hmm.
system, which India went ahead despite stiff opposition from the US. I think
Mm-hmm.
that had to be a high point in terms of negotiating capabilities between Modi and Putin. And also continuation of the annual dialogue between India and Russia at the highest level. That also continued. Russia also agreed to commission stage 5 and 6 reactors of Kudankulam nuclear power plant. So that cooperation will only strengthen over the years. And another interesting point was that India and Russia would join hands together to develop a nuclear power plant in Bangladesh. So that again would be a three-party deal, but that would actually help India also to strengthen its own Make in India program. So all in all, Russia-India relations didn't have too many negatives, but just that the friendship also didn't go along too well. So I think it was some kind of a stable relationship. I
Mm-hmm.
think I would give that
And
for the
so a
relationship.
couple of points I want to add. So even on the defense side, the S-400 is the biggest thing that people usually it's in everybody's memory. But also don't
Hmm.
forget that we agreed upon the $3 billion lease for the Chakra 3, the
Hmm.
SSN submarine, and also the four guided missile frigates for the navy, two of which will be built in Russia, and two more which are going to be constructed in a shipyard in Goa.
Yeah, and
Right.
another thing is also the energy cooperation.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think
good
we
one.
started to
Energy
import. Mhm.
cooperation, and also this India and Russia agreeing to have a joint exploration in North Arctic Sea, and in the regions of Siberia and things. So these are the latest additions to the Indo-Russian relationship, because given Russia's inclination to drift towards Pakistan, after it got alienated by the West, it has jumped into China's orbit, and then owing to its levitation to China, it has become closer to Pakistan. At this end, some of the old Russian ambassadors believe that Russia shouldn't lose its strategic advantage it had with the India, and so they started exploring various other avenues where India and Russia together can enhance their cooperation and take the strategic partnership to a new level. So under this, they have given a lot of emphasis to trade, increasing economic cooperation. Another is space cooperation, science and in skill development, science and technology, and
Mhm.
besides the energy cooperation and also the joint exploration in North Arctic Sea. So these were all
Mhm.
the various avenues they thought which, if added to the existing strategic cooperation, can enhance and help in developing a robust strategic partnership between these two traditional allies, or like traditional friends, whatever you can say.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, in
the
addition,
relation.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. In addition to that, Mohal. So the other point was how Russia allowed India to become a member of the SCO, Shanghai
Mm-hmm.
Cooperation
Mm-hmm.
Organization. That happened simply because China also allowed Pakistan to join in. Be that as it may, this is a good entry point for India to join and discuss about security and strategy issues related to Central Asia and Eastern Asia as well. So I think it's a good help that we got from Russia at a timely, opportune moment. So that would actually help us in the long run as well.
Yeah, I think the relationship, as mentioned, has been pretty sort of. I mean, I wouldn't say like one dimensional, maybe like two dimension. I mean, it's not two dimensional; it's like one dimensional with energy and defense. So expanding it to other avenues will strengthen the relationship for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So quickly moving on to the US now. I think when Mr. Modi came into power, India had already started befriending US in more ways than one. Trade was on the upswing. Uh, the nuclear energy deal had already been signed with the US under Mr. Manmohan Singh, and India was anyway a key player in Afghanistan. So Trump actually had to just build on the solid foundation that was already laid for the past 10 to 15 years, ever since uh, ever since the Kargil, sorry, ever since the nuclear test that India tested in 1998. So to build on that was the biggest challenge. But Trump anyway came with a different mindset of ensuring that there was trade parity between India and the US. So things kind of started off on a wrong note, so to speak. Trump and his administration kept harping on import duties and tariffs, for which India kept pushing back. So that continues to be a thorn in the relationship even now. Not much progress has been made. Even Trump keeps talking about the motorcycles and how India charges huge tariffs on that, which in my honest opinion is not such a big deal. And not many people buy imported motorcycles out here in India. So yeah, I think trade issues will be sorted out in a slow manner. Um but then the other dimensions were actually more interesting, and they actually grabbed headlines. Uh, some of them were security related, some of them were defense related. In terms of defense, though, the 2+2 dialogue started out, wherein Indian MEA and Raksha Mantri would have a one-on-one dialogue with the Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State. That happened only once, remember, happened in Delhi last year. And that actually kind of emphasized the importance that this bilateral relationship was garnering. And even in terms of defense matters, there was a Lemoa agreement wherein the two countries could use each other's bases to train or to help their naval vessels have a periodic maintenance or even normal refueling and things like that. On top of that was the next agreement, which was the Comcasa, wherein intelligence related stuff could also be exchanged between the US and India. So I think it was a steady and slow but steady improvement in the relationship between the US and India. And this actually helped us when it comes to matters like Afghanistan, where where matters have now come to a stage where there are peace talks happening between Afghanistan national government and the Taliban, and every major player, Russia and US, wants India on the table as well, where India would play a key role in deciding what the future of Afghanistan would be. But for me, the major irritant was how US wanted to arm twist India to stop all kinds of trade with Iran, especially the Chabahar port, and also purchasing oil from them.
Mhm.
India had to indicate that it cannot stop buying oil altogether from Iran. So India had to get some kind of a waiver after a lot of dilly dallying from Washington D.C. But that apart, the other problem was Chabahar. U.S. Categorically stated that India will have to stop helping Iran in building or even commissioning the Chabahar port. But India kind of explained to US that Chabahar was in the best interest of Afghanistan as well. And mind you, both US and India have stake in seeing peaceful and prosperous Afghanistan. So US had to back off on that demand as well. So I think there were a few irritants along the way and a few positives along the way as well. So things do continue to be on the upswing, but a lot more needs to be done.
Yeah, I think even the negatives would be Katsa, where they try to arm twist us into dropping buying the S400 system. But
Hmm.
I mean, for temporarily, we have been told that we will get a waiver and we won't be hit with sanctions. So this is the part of the relationship where it gets tricky, where US might want to exclusively deal with them in terms of military hardware purchase, but we are going to do what's best for India and not get buckled under US pressure to just purchase a Western military equipment. I mean, for example, some military equipment like nuclear subs and stuff, like US is never going to give to us. So that's where we maintain the balance of buying certain hardware from the Russians and some other hardware from the Americans, depending on our needs.
Yeah, in this aspect, I just want to say that Indo-US relationship during this 5 years had two phases. One during the era of President Obama, and one during the era of President Trump. Okay, the beauty of it has been that Modi has managed to have a similar kind of a relationship under both the presidency. And to add on to what Kishore has said, like Obama has given a green signal for starting strategic and economic dialogue between India and US along the lines of what US always had with China. So it was the kind of because of that it has appeared, or like it has made pretty much evident, like India was keen on developing relationship with in sorry, US has been keen on developing relationship with India on par with China. And then it has also given a feeling that US is like looking towards India as kind of uh, a power which can like help in containing China in this region, where like Southeast Asia was turning out to be a conflict prone region. So that was another high point. But then what happened, another difference between what happened under President Obama and Trump is like Trump having pulled out US from the Paris Agreement, India and US had to temporarily suspend whatever the kind of cooperation they had in environmental field, or like about climate change and all those things. So all those programs were suspended under President Obama, President Trump. And another aspect is like under like Obama, India had also played a key role in like uh, in nuclear cooperation program, which President Obama has also taken up, that nuclear security summit. India had
Mhm.
made its presence felt and voice heard because of its like commitment towards nuclear cooperation at that point of time. Getting membership into other three nuclear regimes have become easy, like missile MTCR, Australian group, and the Vasanar group. So
Hmm.
these were
Yeah.
also the additions to India-US relationships, like what Modi has really mobilized and helped India to have its presence felt in the nuclear regime stuff as well.
Great point. Okay, so let's quickly move on to Mohal. And Mohal, if you can talk about the two other uh, dimensions that we did not talk about, Pakistan and China,
Yeah, our two
and
friendly
talk about the
neighbors.
positive. Absolutely. Talk about the positives and negatives.
Yeah, so let's me pick up Pakistan first, and I'll come to the big brother China. So on Pakistan, I mean, Prime Minister Modi, just like previous prime ministers have done, he tried to reach out to Pakistan to solve the vexed problem of Kashmir and other bilateral issues that we have. Now, we did invite Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to the swearing in, and he also made that famous unscheduled stopover in Pakistan on, I believe, Nawaz Sharif's birthday. But I mean, as you know, that the power doesn't rest with the civilian government; it's always with the military. Soon after that, we had the Pathankot attack, and a little while later, in September 2016, we had the attack on the Uri army camp. So I mean, this creates whatever goodwill was created with all the earlier steps taken vanished overnight, or let's say over a series of couple of attacks. Now, in response, like usually, like what Pakistan used to do, it's a saber rattling that we will use nuclear weapons if India tries to do any take any action. So there were these two surgical strikes, as they are called, like the one in September 2016 and the one recently in Balakot. So what these strikes have shown is that that we are not going to be afraid of the nuclear blackmail from Pakistan, and also importantly, in between the two binaries of not doing anything and trying to issue statements or give dossiers and trying to isolate Pakistan on the international stage, and the other extreme of all out war, there exists an option in the middle which doesn't climb the so-called escalatory ladder. So the airstrikes were shown that below the all-out war, there exists a sub-conventional blow to the enemy, which will thread the needle of not climbing the escalatory ladder, but also providing some kind of uh, what you call uh, you are imposing some kind of pain on the enemy, that like their asymmetric warfare with terrorism in India won't go unchecked. So this was an important step. I mean, even the same thing was exists had been repeated in Balakot, and also we see
Mhm.
that there is a lot of tension at the border right now. So what I had like mentioned in one of our earlier podcasts, that we need a full spectrum response. We cannot be in this continuous outreach and outrage cycles where we have an outrage cycle, we put pressure on Pakistan, and then we let off the pressure where they get a chance to get off. So what we need is, we need political, economic, and military pressure on Pakistan, where they're having a lot of economic issues, to make them change their behavior. Now, strikes might not change the behavior overnight, but at least it could guide them towards realizing that there has to be a cost imposed to these attacks.
So, yeah, let me ask you a question there,
Mm-hmm.
Mohal. There are quite a few people who allege that Modi's Pakistan policy has been all over the place, right from inviting Nawaz Sharif to going
Mm-hmm.
to greet Nawaz Sharif personally
Mm-hmm.
on his birthday, and also allowing
Mm-hmm.
Pakistani investigators
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to come and see the attack that happened in the Indian Air Force base in
Mm-hmm.
Pathankot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, from that extreme to conducting surgical strikes not once but twice, and
Mm-hmm.
also
Mm-hmm.
retaliating on the line of control with a heavy-handed approach, and adopting a muscular policy as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think is the true Pakistan policy that Modi has
I
adopted?
mean, as I mentioned, see, like all prime ministers have gone through this outrage and outreach cycle. So it's no
Right?
different that everybody has made an honest attempt, like even Vajpayee or even Dr. Manmohan Singh. Everybody made the attempts, and I'm pretty sure, like even the prime ministers before.
Hmm.
So I mean, people can make that claim that it has been all over the place. I mean, I agree that maybe the letting the Pakistani, people on the Pathankot airbase was not a good
Right.
idea in hindsight.
Hmm.
So what I think is needed is, there wasn't this full spectrum response where you push them on all ends. Now just having military strikes is not the solution. So what I we want is a continuous, no holds barred pressure on all fronts. Then only you can change the behavior of the enemy, when you push them over the cliff with pressure on all sides. What I fear is that, let's say if the prime minister gets re-elected or a new government comes in, we should not let off the pressure saying, okay, you know what, there is a change in policy and we begin a new cycle of outreach, because the deep state, unless uh, unbearing pressure is put on them, they won't change their behavior. So I mean, that's my point. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
So
mean, there has been some change in policy for sure, but I mean, that's what all prime ministers have done. And yeah, maybe a little bit more pressure could have been put from the front, but I mean, now what's, I think what important is like what we do going forward, whoever comes to power.
I kind of
Uh,
agree when you say full spectrum response, and it has already started in more ways than one. SARC,
mhm.
for all practical purposes, is almost on its deathbed, and we
Yeah.
won't see it coming back again in the near future unless until a miracle happens in Pakistan. And beyond that, the FATF and the
Hmm.
UNSC push that we are seeing, where all the other major powers are kind of helping India's cause against it,
Hmm.
for its fight against terrorism.
Mhm.
and also India talking about using the complete share of India's
Mhm.
water
Mhm.
that is
Yeah, I mean,
under its
mhm, mhm.
share.
Yeah,
So yeah.
just to
So, like,
sum up,
just one point, Harita, before you can
uh,
jump in. So what my fear is that many times, like, we might just pat ourselves on the back, be it this government or the next government said, oh, we just did military strikes in Pakistan, we gave them a befitting response. And, like, I mean, some of it might be obviously political in nature, but then we cannot sit on our laurels, uh like, post the election and say, you know what, we did very good. We need to keep working day in and day out to keep the pressure on. We cannot take our foot off the pedal. Sorry, Harita, that's my point with Pakistan. Like, we cannot
yeah,
be self congratulating and saying, okay, you know what, let's back off the pressure now, because that will just bring it back to square one.
no, I just wanted to summarize in a one point, one line, saying that to start off, when Modi has started off his tenure, it was like Pakistan were having all cues in its hands to meddle with India. But coming to the end of his tenure, it appears as if India is having an upper hand over Pakistan. I am I totally agree that India cannot rest back or sit back enjoying this having this self congratulatory kind of approach. But to begin, but we need to acknowledge that India is now having an upper hand over Pakistan, having exposed it internationally. This kind of people coming France forwarding India's UN resolution of proscribing Masood Azhar and things like that were unheard of earlier. So it's like India is slowly taking an edge. So that's what I just wanted to add.
Yeah.
Okay, Mohal, can you quickly move on to China now?
Yeah, so I mean, see, like, as of today, obviously the big issue is with Pakistan, but I think that should not distract it from the fact that our main strategic challenge going forward is not Pakistan, but it's China. I mean, it's like, I mean, as I've said before, I guess in the one of the earlier podcasts, that Pakistan is like a rash, like, you know, which you will never get rid of. It will suddenly flare up from time to time, like after it did after the Pulwama and Balakot incidents. But, like, China is a slow moving cancer which is going to kill you silently over a long period of time. So China is the main strategic challenge for India. Now, in the beginning, I mean, Modi did invite Xi Jinping to Ahmedabad, and they did have talk. But at that same time, we had incursions into Ladakh. So that did show,
Mm-hmm.
like, the two-faced nature of Chinese diplomacy. Now, China today is like 5 times bigger than India, and they would want to throw their weight around and not consider India as a equal, and they want to sort of show India their place. Now, the Doklam, or the, as some said, Dolam, was a great incident where they didn't expect India to provide a strong response. I think what used to happen is, under the previous governments, the army obviously used to stand firm, but there wasn't the same level of political backing which was there this time. I mean, if you remember, one of the incursions in, like, under the previous government, I think one of the ministers had mentioned it as an acne on the face, which was kind of ridiculous to put it in that way. But I think that was a good way that the Doklam, like, we stood firm that we won't allow our red lines to be crossed, and we stood in against Chinese, all kinds of, like, psychops and media warfare, where they used to continuously berate us and say, we will remind you of the 62 war. And but we quietly did a good diplomacy in the background. And also, it was good that all the political parties in India didn't speak a word about it. I think this is an incident, I think, in international relations, school should be taught in the future of how to respond to, like, a crisis where the political class is practically silent, and we use backroom diplomacy versus, let's say, fighting or other means to resolve disputes. Now, with China, like I mean, eventually, like the relationship did take a nosedive after the Dokulam incident, um, and then eventually, like we realized that like it wasn't working out for us, and neither the Chinese, who were dealing with other pressing issues such as North Korea and the trade war with US. So the Wuhan summit was basically, I mean, many people, as I wrote, like overread too much into it. It wasn't any kind of magical reset. It was just both sides calling a timeout that, hey, the modus vivendi that existed between us for years isn't working out. We need to just sit out and talk what are our points and what are our red lines to see how we can work to take the relationship forward. So yeah, there have been like highs and lows in this relationship. On the trade front, I just want to mention that one of the problems we haven't been able to resolve under this government was like the trade deficit, which was around 2.5 billion, has ballooned to like 5 billion, even though like just this month we saw reports that it has gone down for the first time. But doubling of the trade deficit is bad in terms of the economics with India, while the relationship is growing in terms of trade. But the trade deficit, we haven't been able to convince Chinese to allow more imports into the nation to put an imbalance on the trade deficit. Kishore?
Yeah, Harita, you have a point to make on this?
What I want to say is like given China-US trade animosities right now, India has much to gain rather than to lose. I think that this is going to be a beginning when trade deficit is going to come down, and it is this trend is going to continue. That's
But
what
I,
I
Mhm.
believe.
but I think
Mm,
so. You have a good point, but I think they need to relax more restrictions. I mean, I think we just started exporting rice to them, so they need to relax more categories. So that's where the negotiations have to be done. That, hey, could you relax a few more categories to work on the trade imbalance?
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's true. And then there is a gossip among the strategic circles that if this government is going to get back into power, they have a formidable Indo-Chinese China's foreign policy, which is going to be unveiled in the next term. So there is a already it is believed that India has taken note of China, the growing trade deficit, and then India is trying to come back with double the force with the strategic foreign policy towards directed towards China. So
Yeah, I
I
mean,
do.
Yeah.
the
Yeah. So,
other.
Mohal, I had a question for you on
Sure,
this.
sure.
Would you see more Wuhan-like summits happening in the future, where they are not termed as state visits, but probably off-the-cuff kind of remarks can be made between the two leaders, and they can talk their hearts out and try to see where they stand on different issues? Would you see that happening again and again?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the frequency, but I mean, Prime Minister Modi has been uh, amicable to such events. The main thing is what comes out of these events is important, because after the Wuhan summit, I mean, there was some talk about coordination between the two armed forces to make sure that the incursions and those go down, but they haven't gone down. So it's more
Mm-hmm.
about the concrete steps. Now, the challenge we have with China is like they're like probably like 5 times bigger. I mean, they spend a lot on their defense forces. So we have enough deterrence, but we cannot let the deterrence grow because they're like churning out ships, planes, and all kinds of military hardware. I mean, some of the training is suspect, but I mean, as they say, like quantity also has a quality of its own. So, like if you look at the.
My point was a little different. So even when it comes to things other than bilateral ties,
Mhm.
China doesn't seem to be helping India on the international scene, be it in the Security Council or in FATF or any other international fora. So
Mhm.
Wuhan summit again, there will be many questions raised about the failure or success of this kind of summit.
Mhm. Mhm.
Again, just to add on to it, both Prime Minister Modi and President Xi has agreed to have a informal summit in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if Modi comes back to power, it's going to happen. And another thing is, like, India must learn to read between lines of what
Mhm.
China is saying. And I mean, it's true with what Pakistan and China are doing. Both of them have the similar kind of policy, which is like full of deceit and subterfuge. Until unless India learns to live with it and learns to analyze these kind of statements which have a deeper implication, it will be difficult to manage both the countries.
Yeah, I mean, also like if you look at the BRI aspect of it, I mean, we need to increase the engagement with the neighborhood. So we have increased the engagement. Now comes the delivery part. So like Prime Minister Modi has done a lot of good. Now his words have to be backed up by actions on the ground, which is happening. But in some cases, just because China does the work faster, these countries are getting into those debt traps, as like you say in Hambandota or like probably even Gwadar in the future. So now the like you have to put meat to the bones so that they have an option versus just accepting a debt trap from China. So that's where I think like Prime Minister Modi has made a very good start. Now we just have to work on to see it through. That I think once you provide a credible alternative that doesn't take forever to implement, I think countries will drift back a little bit towards India versus just going totally with China. So that also has to be kept into perspective, that we need to deliver faster on all the projects in the neighborhood to counter the BRI. And also one more thing on the Indo-Pacific. I mean, that's like, and the Quad, like we are trying to sort of like hedge versus. So that's like the interesting part. So as I think somebody interesting said, like we are kind of doing a engagement, which is like a hedging and engagement at the same time. So I think in China we have to play the long game. It's not like we are going to like outgrow China anytime soon. It's like, as like Dan Xiaoping said, like, bide your time, and like when China goes down, maybe we'll at a better negotiating stage. Right now, try to have a new modus vivendi where you maintain some sort of peace and what you call peace at the border, so that we can grow more till we are at a position to challenge China in a better term, while also putting out your red lines like Doklam that say, hey, you cannot cross this. That if you cross this, then we are going to speak up. So that's the challenge. Like, how do you sort of keep it under the surface, grow more till China comes down due to their various issues of debt and demographics, while also trying to maintain the like your growth. Because if India doesn't grow economically, we cannot become a superpower that way. So we need to focus on how to maintain this relationship uh, without like getting too confrontational with China, which is obviously a challenge.
Mhm. Okay, great. So I think we'll wrap it up here. But before we end, I think we'll go around the table and try to give a score on Modi's foreign policy. Harita, can I start with you? On a scale of 5, what would be your score?
Something between 3.5 and 4.
Okay. Mohal?
I would say 3.5 out of 5.
Okay, and I would not be that optimistic. I would be somewhere between 3.5,
Mm-hmm.
simply because I see it as a continuum, and it has to continue for the next term as well if Modi manages to come back to power.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any closing comments before we wind up, Harita?
Yeah, what I want to say is like Modi's proactive and pragmatic foreign policy has given a new push to India's position, like and to its pursuit of uh, putting itself as a rising and responsible power in South Asia. Besides that, with I mean, Modi has come to power without any baggages, and he
Hmm.
has used this to his advantage to the maximum. See, initially to begin with, critics scoffed at Modi, saying that this Hinduist the leader of a Hindu nationalist party cannot break ice with Muslim countries. But then he has proved them absolutely wrong. He has floored
Mm-hmm.
the leaders of all the major Muslim countries, and
Mm-hmm.
he was conferred like all the highest civilian awards, be it the Saudi Arabia, be it Palestine, or now from UAE. And now,
UAE. Yeah.
like another thing which I want to just remind the viewers is like Modi is expected to again visit UAE something around April 21st, where he is
Mm-hmm.
going to inaugurate a Hindu temple there, which is like remarkable and historical. This project he has just started up, or like he has pushed this project on his first visit to UAE in 2015, and now see by 2019 it is like a reality. So there are certain aspects where you have to definitely give credit to Modi, and
Mm-hmm.
certain aspects like the ballooning trade deficit with China, and then the Pakistan still continues. There are certain irritants, but altogether, what I want to say is it has been a proactive diplomatic engagement with other countries, and then a kind of an unprecedented engagement where it's like no, not a mean thing to say that like MEA has come out openly to say that in the span of 5 years they have reached to 189 countries, which is like unprecedented. Barring three countries, India has reached out to all the countries,
Mm-hmm.
be it ranging from prime minister visit to president's visit, vice president's visit, and also visits from the MEA. So
Mm-hmm.
this kind of an approach is really a magnificent thing which India hasn't had till now. None of the leaderships till now hasn't focused enough on like how India should position itself as a global leader. Well, people say like Nehru deserves all credit for like enhancing India's global stature. That was a different time and a different ball game. India had kind of embraced this non-aligned movement and wanted to create a kind of different kind of an analogy, or like different kind of try to offer a different kind of an alternative in the Cold War era. But in post-Cold War era, when countries are really looking forward to have a multipolar world, India is contributing immensely towards that, and I think like it's not like profusely covering praises on Modi, but then we need to give due credit where it is, and also like uh, it's not the end of it, and India must sustain this momentum, and until unless India does that, it will not, its own existence will be at stake, in the sense like India is now coveting respect from other countries by standing tall, or like by not giving up during the Doklam standoff. So that has been deeply ingrained in the minds of smaller countries, especially Southeast Asian countries, which are looking forward to India as like a new power, or like
Mm-hmm.
a benign power whose growth
Mm-hmm.
is going to be helpful to the neighbors around. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the thing that India should pick up all these things, and then should move forward with this kind of an approach towards its smaller neighborhood. When once it wins the hearts and minds of immediate neighborhood, India is definitely going to have a great future ahead, or like given its demographic advantage, huge diversity, syncretic culture. This is the way, like I must say, Modi has shown a way, or has given a path along which India should tread, so that it can uh, realize its like potential. Thank you.
Mohan, you share the same optimism as Haritha?
Yeah, so I think the current government has brought activism to the foreign policy, which was missing for the some time, especially under the end of the previous government. Also, I mean, we have broken some of the old shackles of like strategic or non-alignment, where like we couldn't move closer to the US just because there was a lot of opposition to Lamoa during the UPA years. So Modi, like no longer constrained by this old school of thought of being perfectly non-aligned, understood that Lamoa doesn't lessen India's strategic autonomy. So there have been a lot of examples where we have grown closer to US because of the increasing threat from China. I mean, the main goal still remains like how to grow economically, and that's where the increased engagement with rest of the world would come into picture. Um, One more comment is like, I mean, there have been a lot of positives and obviously some negatives during the term, but overall, it's a fairly positive term. um I mean, the goal here was to give a realistic picture of the overall policy, which has been mostly positive. I mean, the assertive policy, we are seeing the positives from this in terms of increased engagement from all around the world. I mean, one of the examples would be the overflight over Saudi Arabia to Israel, which would be
Mm-hmm.
impossible for any other region. So, while managing to balance Iran and Saudi Arabia and US and Russia, so this activism has brought as they call the soft power. So we has increased the India standing in the world, which has seen like during the Balakot airstrikes that practically nobody supported Pakistan's position, and everybody asserted India's right to self-defense by striking terrorist targets in Pakistan. So the hope is that I mean, we learn from like the things that didn't go well in the first term and build on the multiple set of positives that were seen, which can be carried forward towards second term, hopefully. So I would say
Mm-hmm.
summarize with like it's a good start, but since we have the big strategic challenge from Pakistan and China, we would have to work very hard over the next 5 years, whoever is in power, to make sure that we gain in terms of balance versus both the nations. So, good start, but much to do, I would say, in summary.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I would actually look at it from a different lens altogether. So, in the context of 2014, Indian policy paralysis and inward looking mindset, I think Indian MEA and the PMO started reaching out to Indian diaspora all around the world, trying to take them into confidence. All those operations where they had to bring back labor force that was working in troubled areas in Middle East actually helped India gain a lot of brownie points, not only among its own population, but also around the world, where India was considered seriously for its humanitarian efforts. On top of that, again, India reach out to old friendships like Japan and South Korea, which we did not talk about much in our discussion, where the Modi Abe friendship kind of rose to new levels, and also India's outreach to South Korea and trying to help them diffuse the tension in the Korean Peninsula. And I think all these subtle efforts has really helped matters for India. And I think to summarize it, India's emphasis that it is a global player, it is a emerging global player, and it behaves like one was actually the highlight for me. Until now, India was claiming that it has a rightful place at the high league table, but it never acted like one. But I think in the last 5 years, I think that was the difference that we could see, where India actually played its part. Even when you take the example of the Solar Alliance, where India actually agreed to a quicker deadline of cutting down on its coal emission, and at the same time also setting up ambitious targets for solar power generation. So I think in all these respects, I feel that India actually played its part as an emerging global player, and only time will tell as to how India would maintain the tempo and continue with the good work that has happened in the past 5 years. So I think that would be my assessment. I think we'll wrap it up here. I thank you, Harita, for taking the time out and joining us once again. It's a pleasure to talk to you as always.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So that, dear listeners, wraps up today's episode, where we kind of covered Modi's foreign policy in the past 5 years, and how it has helped Indian strategic standing around the world. If you have any topics that you would like to hear about, do let us know. But do remember that they need to be directly related to Indian foreign policy. To continue hearing about such interesting topics, do subscribe to our channel India Rising wherever you are listening to us. Until the next episode, this is Harita, Mohal, and Kishore signing off.